Number 1.
City Council Parana Park Land Vesting Bill, committee stage.
I declare the House and Committee for further consideration of the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Land Vesting Bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman.
The House and Committee for further consideration of the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Land Vesting Bill. Members, when we last considered this bill, the debate on Clause 8 was in progress and David Shearer had the call. He's just under 1.5 minutes remaining of this call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I can distinctly recall when I left last that everybody was on the edge of their seats waiting to see what I was going to say further on the Parana Park bill. And I was so looking forward to this coming back into the House today. I was, Mr. Chair, talking about GST, and I was saying that under this piece of legislation, in the transfer of this piece of land, there will be no GST applying. Unlike every... Thank you very much. Yes, that the senior whip over there remembers distinctly. It was one of those things he thought about for the last 2 weeks while this bill was going from Members' Day to Members' Day. That this bill doesn't have GST applied to it, unlike everybody else in New Zealand who has to pay GST at the inflated rate. At the inflated rate of 15%, Mr. Chair, which was an increase by the national government against their election promise in 2008. They promised not to put GST up. John Key specifically said that, and they put it up from 12.5% to 15% and broke a promise. And the promise, Mr. Chair, have been broken again because we're seeing the same things emerging in the with regard to the working for families and all the various other excuses that have come out of the Christchurch earthquake. Mr. Chair. I am getting on to Clause C.
David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm referring directly here in this speech to Clause 8B regarding the goods and service tax that does not apply in this case to the Parana Park. Wouldn't it be great, Mr. Chair, if the goods and service tax didn't only just apply to the Parana Park, but also didn't apply to fresh fruit and vegetables? Because if it didn't apply to fresh fruit and vegetables, then fresh fruit and vegetables would be that much cheaper for ordinary New Zealanders. Ordinary New Zealanders would not have to pay that piece of the tax, and that would be cheaper. And we know from scientific studies that have been done throughout the country that the uptake and the consumption of fresh fruit and vegetables would increase. So, Mr. Chair, this is a bill that in some ways is leading the way in the way that tax is being levied against it. And I would like to think that the Parana Park and fresh fruit and vegetables go together and not having GST applying to them. This, Mr. Chair, is in Clause B, is really...
Order, I think we need to come back to Clause 8.
Clause 8B, Mr. Chair. I want to come on to a second point which we raised in a couple of the other clauses in the consideration of this bill, Mr. Chair, and that is Clause 3, which sets out the area known as Parana Park, because if we are vesting land here, as it says at the beginning of Clause 8, vesting of land, not gift, supply of services or disposition for certain purposes, we would want to know pretty exactly what land we are in fact vesting. And it's not clear, and we brought it up in some of the earlier comments on this bill. And I'd appreciate David Bennett, who is bringing this bill into the Parliament. He has our support, but I do think he has to clarify, and perhaps he's had the chance in the last 2 weeks, if he was in his electorate, if he was in his electorate, I'm sure he was, to check out where that 0.4 of a hectare, nearly 1 acre, has disappeared to. If he could clarify that Mr. Chair, in perhaps a response to the House, and a response to us all of us here who are supporting this bill. None of us have got anything against it. We think it's visionary. We think it is visionary in the sense of George Parr, a person who was a man of vision, a person who did have a plan for his area of the country, a man who is quite unlike the Prime Minister, for example, who doesn't seem to have a plan or a vision for the country, but Mr. George Parr did have a vision. And I think if the member could give us some indication of where 0.4 of a hectare has disappeared to in Parana Park here, it may have been converted into dairy farm. I doubt it. I don't think 0.4 of a hectare would be necessarily a good thing to do in the middle of Hamilton Central. I suspect that it includes the house that is currently being occupied by the Hamilton City Council. The ground staff, I think, occupy one corner of this park, and they're using it to administer the park. And perhaps that's the answer. But I don't want to put words into the member's mouth. I nearly said minister there. I want to take that. I'm sure that I didn't say that. And then the member's mouth. But I would like to hear, and I'm sure the people on our side of the House, Mr. Chair, do also want to hear what happened to 1 acre of land, because I can imagine that 1 acre of land in the middle of Hamilton is very valuable. Let's face it. You could put apartments. You could subdivide it up into 8 or 9 blocks, sell it all off. I mean, we don't want any. We wouldn't want to see any inappropriate use of that land. We'd like to see it being used in the way that George Parr intended it to be, for the children, for historic value, for recreation, for its reserve status in the middle of one of New Zealand's urban centres, and to that to be used appropriately. I'm sure that the Tainui Trust Board as well, who spoke on this, because that 0.4 of a hectare is also close to the river, which is a concern to them as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ian Lee.